Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, here to do a quick live stream with you on a couple of issues that are happening right now that I really think are people are you're interested in, people are following, but I think we're missing the boat on some of them, and I wanted to just give you an update on some of the things that are happening. Let's start out. The headline that you got was that this was going to be about Donald Trump being right again, and he is right again. But I'm going to start with something that isn't that. I'll get there in about a few minutes. I want to start with KBJ. I want to start with the Ketanji Brown Jackson, that nomination and where it's at. Right now, we don't have any Democrats, including Joe Manchin, who said he will vote for her. So we don't have any Democrats opposing it. But the fact is, a lot of the Republicans who the Democrats expected to have a chance at getting to try to make it quote unquote bipartisan have essentially said, no, we can't vote for her because of her terrible record on criminal justice sentencing. And the fact that the Sentencing Commission won't release the information so you could actually find out how she really thinks based on back and forth communications. So the sentencing record is really based on about 8 cases that she has a trial court judge dealing with child pornography and whether her sentencing that she gave to people who were convicted of that crime. So there's a lot of Republicans who are kind of who normally would probably want to just say, okay, well, the president gets to choose who the president wants for the Supreme Court. But in this instance, have backed away. Richard Burr just announced from North Carolina that he's going to vote against it. Lindsey Graham, who's never voted against a Democrat presidential or any presidential Supreme Court nominee, he basically says that's their prerogative. And he said he's going to vote against her today also. So there's a lot of movement to consolidate on the Republican side against voting for her. A couple of people that we're looking at who on the Republican side who are problematic. You have the normal two and that we always expect in Susan Collins from Maine. We have Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. And then you have Mitt Romney from Utah, who is oftentimes problematic. And ironically, with Mitt Romney, he voted against her a year ago to be on the District Court of Appeals. And so it's rather odd that he would, which is normally, if you're going to give somebody a pass, you give them a pass at a lower court level, you engage in further scrutiny and much deeper scrutiny at the Supreme Court level. And yet Romney is still undecided, apparently, on the KBJ nomination. Acronyms are big in DC, as you can see, but it's a lot easier than KBJ. It's a lot easier than Ketanji Brown Jackson. So I think that ends it up. That's why KBJ becomes the way it works. But no. So we've got a lot of work needs to be done. The key to this is to at the very least force every Democrat, including Joe Manchin, to vote for the nomination with no Republican cover. That way, and if she gets confirmed because of the vote of the vice president, 51-50, if that occurs, it'll be unprecedented for a nominee to be in that position, and it'll be and quite honestly, it puts some doubt into the minds of whether or not she actually has. She's she'll be on the court for life if that happens. But it'll create a long memory about the reservations people had about her. And more importantly, it'll create an environment where some of those Democrats, say John Tester from Montana, we're looking at Mastio Cortez from Nevada, Mark Kelly from Arizona, Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, those 4 Democrats, and Joe Manchin from West Virginia. As people are reviewing, whether or not they're going to vote for them, and 4 of those are up this election. Manchin's up in 2 years. But this will be a big deal. So her decisions on the court will be part of the election cycle. And the fact that she is is probably the most radical left nominee ever, and hasn't been asked hardly, basically hasn't been subject to any real hard scrutiny. It is, and has hidden her record, quite frankly. It's going to make it so. I think those members, those senators, are going to be praying that she's not voting on controversial things between now and their election, because trust me, any crazy that comes out of her mouth is going to be, or off of her pen, will be held against them politically. Because let's face it, the far left, is so far out of the mainstream of America. Their whole objective is to indoctrinate America to come to their position, but right now they remain out of the mainstream. And people like AOC and others don't recognize that. They believe the way the Democrats should go is far left for this election because it's their only hope to mobilize their base. But others are pushing back really hard in the Democratic Party to say, if we go far left, we're going to get destroyed. Elections are won with independent voters. They're not won by just partisans. And with independent voters breaking heavily towards Republican candidates in the polling, it's going to get, a lot of Democrats are looking at this election year, 2022, and are wondering if it's survivable. How many people who think they're in safe districts are going to lose because the wave will be that large. So that's what a lot of the Democrats in town are thinking. Having a vote in the Senate with a radical nominee is certainly not going to help any of the Democrat senators who are up. And another one who's vulnerable in 2 years is Jon Tester from Montana. Note, I'm talking states that are small population states, by and large, that have Democrat representatives, Democrat senators, because truthfully, Republicans tend to do better in more rural states. And as a result, those senators don't really represent their state in a very, very, very real way. And given that, they are vulnerable when they can't pretend that they're moderate when they vote for radicals for the Supreme Court. It's one thing everybody understands. So it's going to be an interesting scenario. We have a campaign up urging Senate to vote to oppose KBJ. I'd encourage you to go to getliberty.org to look at that and hopefully participate. And if you've already participated, share it with all your friends. This is one, Supreme Court's for life, and we need these senators to really, really do their job. They weren't given the constitutional power to make a decision whether to confirm and affirm a nominee just so they could just rubber stamp things. It's their job to actually look and say, is this person suitable? Is their point of view, is their thinking mainstream enough that they should be given a lifetime appointment? Those are the kind of things, real tough decisions. And so many times stuff comes down to personality, and it's just the way it is, but we're humans. But the fact is, this is an intellectual argument, and it's very important that the Senate engage in that with sobriety, but also with a vision of what America is going to look like in the future, what stamp they want to put on it. And because this Supreme Court nomination is one of the places where senators have an opportunity to put a lifetime stamp on the United States of America through the judicial branch. And they have to take it seriously. They are a co-equal branch of government, and they need to act like a co-equal branch of government. And oh, by the way, the only real curb on the power of the courts, which actually were perceived to be the least powerful of the three branches of government during the time of Madison, the only curbs on the power of the courts are the appointment and confirmation process at the beginning of who gets to be on it, and then funding for the courts. There's really no other curbs that you have on the courts. One thing that FDR tried was court packing, which got roundly rejected. The Biden administration has been looking at court packing and trying to change the makeup of the Supreme Court from 9 to whatever it would be, 13 or something, I think is what they're talking about, with a goal of basically taking what is a majority of 6 Supreme Court justices appointed by a Republican and 3 appointed by a Democrat, and rebalancing that to the left. And that's it's a political maneuver. It's politicization of the courts. It polls really bad. The Democrats don't have the votes to do it. But it's a live consideration here in Washington, D.C. And ALJ has been very vocal against it. I wrote something about it, I think, last week on it again. And it is and quite honestly, politicization of the courts is perhaps the single worst thing that could happen, because guess what? When the Republicans take control, if they take control in 2025, with the president in both houses of the legislature, they could change the number of Supreme Court justices to 27 and have 14 appointees if they went up to 13. So there's absolutely no way that, it's just a never-ending snowball effect of problems. And that's and so there's not really, it's a real bad consequence. So stacking the courts, while the Democrats are talking about it, fortunately, they don't have the votes. And even more importantly, it's a disaster, because the courts then become completely political beings as opposed to legal beings. And the whole system of the rule of law and justice gets thrown on its head, because justice then becomes whatever the majority in the Congress and the president think it ought to be, regardless of what is the actual law and what the Constitution says. So it really is an aberration and abhorrent to try to do that. Last thing, court packing. The makeup of the court is not dictated in the Constitution. It does not say 9 members. Between 1789 and 1869, there were multiple different numbers ranging from 5 to 9, I guess, 5 to 9 members on the Supreme Court. And it was moved around for political purposes, and very blatantly. In fact, they changed the makeup of the court twice in 2 years, because the parties changed who were in control of the Congress, and as a result, and the presidency, and as a result, they just moved it around to suit the needs of the incumbent party. So it does have historical precedent. In fact, it has historical precedent going all the way back to the 2nd president of the United States and the 3rd president of the United States. So this idea is as old as time. Here's the difference. Once we got to 1869, and there had been a lot of maneuvering around the Civil War, the number 9 got settled on. And since 1869, the Supreme Court has been made up of 9 justices. And it's a number that works. It's an odd number, so you don't have ties. And it is a number that has been, it's kind of now the agreed upon history. And to change that number because for political gain is I think just it kind of wipes away the idea that the court is a neutral third branch of government. So got to oppose that. Let's talk about, let's see, what do we have? Got a few Michael Brand, our GOP senators need to vote no on radical leftist lenient Judge KBJ as the next. Yeah, absolutely. Once again, go to getliberty.org. We should have that take action up on that website, and it's and just send it out to your friends. The fact is, the people who need to do this are out there. They may not know it right now, but they're out there. And the fact of the matter is, they are in your contact list. Don't worry if they're in a state that, that doesn't make sense, that, they're going to vote yes, they're going to vote no. Engagement is the key here. We have to get people used to engaging on political issues and have it become normative. The more people on our side who normally engage, who are getting involved, who are taking part in this and saving our country, the better chance we have to save the country. And that is it's just fact. And so that's where we're really trying to do here. Whether or not we're going to focus on some states in terms of some targeting on advertising and the like, but people all over the country need to engage. The two senators from Texas, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, need to be getting emails into their offices saying, oppose her, because they have to be affirmed that they're making the right decision. The two senators from Louisiana, Republicans, have to be getting opposition to her, even though they might be inclined to oppose her, and certainly John Kennedy is going to oppose her, but they have to be getting emails from their constituents opposing them. Why? Because it affirms that position when they're under attack by the Washington Post and the liberal elite media here in DC. It affirms their position that the people back home agree with them. And it's more important than ever that the people back home assert their prerogative by letting their senators and congressmen know, because the pressure from the elite, from the media elite, from the Jeff Bezos owned Washington Post, from the New York Times, from the Facebook and all the censoring that goes on Facebook and Google and the like and Twitter, makes people cautious about taking positions. And the only way politicians aren't cautious is if they know that that their constituents have their back. And that's why you should be doing this stuff, even if you know your senator's on your side. And on the other side, if you live in a state like Maryland, where I live, and you have senators who are terrible by any measure, it's still important that they understand that there are people in their state who don't agree with them, that there are people who are pushing back, that they have constituents who are on the other side, because that may, at some level, it may stop them from doing something stupider in the future by just thinking, how many votes is this going to cost me? The minute if we can get the Democrats to start thinking about political consequences for far left actions, they're far less likely to dive further to the left. And that's why, if you live in a Democrat state, it's still worthwhile to bombard them. It is still worthwhile to bombard them, because you're telling them that if you go too far, there will be a majority against them, and they have to then pay political consequences. But if they don't hear from anybody, they're going to just assume that they can do whatever they want to do, and there's no pushback. So that's the rationale behind that. Let's talk a little bit about something else that's happening on the Supreme Court front. And this is very personal to me. And I'm sitting up because I want you to understand that this is not a slouch one. This is a sit up and pay attention thing. There's been a campaign, a political hit job campaign being run by the national media against Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginni. The objective is to try to disqualify Clarence Thomas from a number of controversial cases simply because his wife has an opinion. Now, imagine the audacity of a Democrat who sits there and out of their mouths every single day. I mean, they've got a Supreme Court nominee she has two qualifications. She has a lot of qualifications, but the only two things that mattered in the selection process to get it down to, so she got to the top of the pile, were that she was a woman and that she was Black. Now, she may not know how to define a woman, and that's her own problem. We know she's lying there, but the fact of the matter is that was one of the criteria. And back in the day, the idea that, just think of these liberal Democrats saying, well, we think that a man should not be able to have a position or not be able to can't have a different opinion than their wife. Can you imagine the audacity of saying that that the spouse has to shut up, the wife has to shut up because her husband has important work to do? Well, that's what the Democrats are saying in this instance. Ginni Thomas is a friend of mine. Ginni Thomas is a really good person. She's earnest. She cares deeply. She loves this country, and she's conservative. There's no doubt about it. She is a friend of mine, and I will stand up and fight for her till the cows come home. This doesn't matter. This is personal now. And when they try to tell the world that Clarence Thomas should recuse himself or should be impeached because his wife has an opinion on issues that matter in this country, well, you know what? They need to just go find something else to do. I almost said something bad. It just is infuriating. I mean, it's just infuriating. And when you look at it, I mean, there's so many examples where they haven't cared. But the most glaring example to me that shows they don't really care about what spouses think is not a single question. KBJ has not faced a single question. Well, what does your husband think about these things? What is your husband's position? How do you know? I really need to know. Her husband is a doctor, a surgeon who teaches, is a professor at Georgetown University, a very liberal university in DC. So in a time when public health has been at the forefront for 2.5 years, as we all know, the question is obvious. Well, was your husband in favor of mask mandates? Was your husband in favor of all the different draconian measures that were taken to make freedom less secure in order to deal with COVID? Was your husband disappointed in any measures that were taken? Was your husband privately upset about anything that Trump did, or thought that Trump should go further? Was your husband upset about anything that Biden did? Should Biden have gone further? See, because those are issues that are likely to come before the Supreme Court, and they already have. Whether it's vax mandates, whether it's vax passports, whether it's masks, whether public employees should have to have these things, all of those things are issues that are in the courts. And the fact is that KBJ has not been asked about her husband's position on any of those issues tells you a simple truth. They don't care what he thinks because he thinks like them. They care about Ginni Thomas because she's a powerful conservative woman who's made her way independently and to become a powerful force in DC. And as a result, she has to be stopped from bringing people together to coalesce around certain issues. And that, my friends, is the ultimate political cynicism. They want to drive, get this, people who say, oh, we have to have a black woman on the court when they can't define a woman, want to drive the only black man off the court because they don't like his wife's opinions. I mean, come on. It defies credibility. We're sending out a Take Action tonight. If you're signed up subscribe to our newsletter, you're going to get a Take Action tonight. And I really ask you to do something on it. And that is urging the Senate, urging members of Congress to stand up and support Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is one of our nation's great jurists. He's the longest serving Supreme Court justice right now. He's still a relatively young man. He's in his early 70s. And he's a brilliant guy. And you know what? He's a leader. He's a conservative. He looks at the world through the lens of what provides maximum freedom along the lines of what's in the Constitution. He happens to be a religious man, and he's one of those people who you just say he's a good man. And in American political system, you can't be a good man and not get attacked for it. Clarence Thomas should be getting wreaths and oratory favor. A lofty words said about him, as were said about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But instead, he's had his entire career on the court with people attacking him, trying to tar and feather him, trying to just make him go away, trying to make it so his voice is not heard, because he provides the Democrats with this inconvenient fact. And that inconvenient fact is a smart black man has an opinion different than the opinion that they dictate, that they demand that blacks have. That's the reason. That's the reason why you don't find him in the African American Museum. So that's the reason why the biography of Clarence Thomas was recently somehow disappeared from Amazon. That's the reason why they cannot allow Justice Thomas's legacy to be unscathed, to not be surrounded in scandal, to not be marred. And this is just the latest attempt for them to mar his legacy, because obviously no black man could ever think these conservative thoughts unless a woman was sticking them in his head. I mean, what a bunch of garbage. These people just piss me off. Let's see what we got. Sorry. Let's see. Well, yeah. Let's go to what I was going to talk about, and because we've got the judge stuff out of the way. I just had to get the Clarence Thomas stuff off my chest. It really makes me mad, and it's unfair. It's Washington at its worst, and it's it's just political garbage. And quite honestly, it's this kind of stuff that makes me want to have to go home at night and sometimes feel like I just have to take a shower because this place is so just gross. And this is another example of that. And it's just, and there's a little more oomph to it because Ginny Thomas is a friend, and I make no bones about that. And I know her character. I know who she is. I've been in meetings with her for years and years, and she's a person who has a voice and has a voice that has every right to be heard. And to try to tell her to shut up because her husband is a Supreme Court justice is really a travesty and quite honestly a loss for America. So with that, I'm going to get off that. So we have this. Let's talk about Trump being right, because this is kind of a theme. I could do a story every single day about Trump being right, but let's talk about some of the things that Trump's been right on, and I'm just going to focus on some easy ones. We all know that Germany's in a fix because they became dependent upon Russian natural gas. It was Donald Trump who told them you need to get alternatives. You have to get alternative supply chains, and as a result, and Germany laughed, and now they're trapped, and they can't respond to an emergency, and they're afraid to respond because Russia can turn off their natural gas, and they have stripped their ability to warm their homes, to make their electric cars run, and to do those kind of things, simply by becoming completely reliant upon natural gas as they've destroyed their nuclear and their coal-fired plants in the country. And if you're dependent upon natural gas for your heating and for your electricity and for your energy in your country, and the only people who get to send you natural gas are people who don't like you very much, guess what? Guess who's the slave and guess who's the slaveholder? At that juncture, Germany becomes a slave to the whims of Vladimir Putin. Just the way it is. Donald Trump said, you got to break this slavery. You got to break this. You got to get alternative supply chains. The Germans laughed, and now they know Donald Trump was right. Where else was Donald Trump right? Well, he's obviously right when he told NATO countries, you better start spending your own money on NATO. You better up your expenditures on national defense to meet the needs of NATO, because suddenly NATO is no longer an abstract concept where we're dealing with foreign, wars in Afghanistan and NATO allies sending, 2 Humvees and a Piper Cub. This is what NATO actually was established for, and suddenly they find themselves staring down the barrel of exactly what NATO was established for. And because Donald Trump stood up and said to them, start spending the money or else we're not going to, they raised their budgets for defense. And as a result, they're better prepared to deal with this crisis inside Europe rather than being totally dependent on the United States to solve their problems for them. So he was right there. He's been right. He was right on energy. We all know, and we talked about the natural gas, but he was right on energy because, in terms of becoming energy independent and what that meant. He put laws into place, he put regulations into place, he stripped away restrictions that caused America to be at the mercy of countries that, they may like us, they may not like us, but you never want to be at the mercy of other countries, at the mercy of OPEC for that matter. Since we had the OPEC energy crisis in '73, it has been rhetorically, every president until Joe Biden has rhetorically said, we need to become energy independent and get into great applause. While Donald Trump didn't just say it, he did it. And now Joe Biden is saying, oh, no, we don't want to be energy independent. In fact, we want to destroy our oil and gas industry. They're the enemy, coal, oil, and natural gas. They're the enemy. We have to destroy them. And we want to be dependent upon Venezuela and and Iran and various countries around the world and Russia who will pump oil and natural gas, and meanwhile creating a situation where we end up in a deficit. We end up being dependent upon them, much like Germany is dependent upon Russia right now. So where's the reason here? Obviously, it was right in the macro scale. It was right in the energy policy. But today, he came out and he was like, "What are you doing by tapping the strategic oil reserve all the time? And attacking the Biden administration for their constant drawing down the strategic oil reserve." The strategic oil reserve is a stockpile of oil. About a third of it is held by the U.S. government. 2/3 is held by a private industry. But it's a stockpile, and it's a pretty large stockpile. And it's designed to be able to make certain that America can withstand a complete oil embargo for a longer period of time. In this case, it's about 60 days is how much our reserves are, and when the tank's topped off, what the reserves are. Well, 3 years ago, we had a blip in the oil markets, and the price of oil went down really, really low. In fact, it was negative dollars, at one point on the futures market, due to some currency stuff, and things just went crazy there for about 14 days. And it was actually during the COVID crisis, so a year and a half ago. And Donald Trump looked at the low oil prices and he said, "Hey guys, let's top off the strategic oil reserve. Rather than, let's pay, if we're only paying 10, 15, 20 bucks a barrel, let's use this the low price we have, and let's spend money to totally fill up, top off the strategic oil reserve." Well, the Democrats in Congress said, "No, we don't want to do that." And they passed legislation that prohibited that from happening as a rider inside of a funding bill. And so the president was not allowed to actually buy replacement oil for the strategic oil reserve based upon a rider by the Democrats in Congress. And so we didn't refill the strategic oil reserve at 20 bucks a barrel, 25 bucks a barrel. But we're drawing it down now that a barrel of oil is at 100 bucks. And Joe Biden's, once again, he's going to be releasing, I think, 1 million barrels a day for an extended period of time. I don't remember if he announced how many days, but basically 1 million barrels a day. What does that mean? Well, that's about 5% of our oil consumption domestically. So we're going to have, and so there will be some domestic price change as a result of that, because that's oil that doesn't have to be purchased. It's oil that's just being put into the system for free. So we will have an impact on the price of the pump, a small impact, but an impact. But the reality is, the strategic oil reserve is supposed to be for a very specific time, and presidents will do it to take price shocks out of the system all the time. But by and large, it's supposed to be used for when there is an actual oil shortage emergency, and we're not able to import the oil we need. And as a result, and you're going to have shortages, and you're going to have lines at the gas pump because there's not enough gas to pump. That strategic oil reserve is designed for that. The strategic oil reserve is designed for if we're in a military conflict, a war, and the supply routes for oil end up being cut, that we're able to provide oil and fuel for our military, for the machines in our military. So we're able to actually fight a war if needed, if the supply lines for imported oil are cut. And dependence on oil that has to be shipped across oceans make the chances of cutting supply lines pretty strong, given that basic fact. So what happens? Biden's now further depleting the strategic oil reserve. Now we're not like down on E. We're not, we may not even be at 3/4. But the fact of the matter is, in an emergency, you want every single drop of oil possible in the strategic oil reserve. we are sitting there. We've had conversations about what's happening in China with Taiwan, what's happening in the Middle East with Iran's rising and attack and has terrorists attacking Saudi Arabia and the constant threat to Israel. We have questions about what's happening with what's happening with cartels in Mexico, what's happening in Venezuela, where it's very likely Venezuela has missiles that are very dangerous to the southern part of the United States. And the Maduro government isn't very favorable to us. So there's lots of questions like that where the normal stability in the world, the Pax Americana is falling apart. And so there's real reason to believe that we could, when you see weakness, that we could end up in a shooting war, a real shooting war, where it's between major superpowers and supply lines to the United States, or they attempt to cut them. And China's developing a navy which has the capacity to go after the supply lines from Saudi Arabia. You have the capacity to shut off the Straits of Hormuz, literally just sink ships in the Straits of Hormuz and make it so tankers can't get out. And you have on the other side in the Red Sea, they're attacking that passageway as well. So getting oil out of Saudi Arabia has two choke points, and they're both in danger of being able to be controlled by people who don't like us very much. And that's the strategy. That's what the Chinese and the Russians are trying to do. They're trying to isolate us in the world, make it so we're dependent on certain places to get our energy, to get our stuff, and then so they can choke that off and do so in a way that causes us to have massive problems, both economic and military. That's what they're doing. You don't have to be a genius. I mean, you just look at the world and you can see it. So, and that's why we have a strategic oil reserve. So we're less vulnerable to those choke points. And yet here we are. Joe Biden is going to bleed 1 million barrels a day every day for the foreseeable future out in order for political reasons, and he'll lower the price a little bit. But if he wants to lower the price and the gas tax and the federal gas tax for 6 months, he'll lower the price, and you won't be putting our strategic oil reserves in jeopardy of being depleted. So once again, Donald Trump was right. He said, let's top them off now. Let's not be just tapping it willy-nilly. Let's make certain we have a full supply in the event that we do face a real need to tap into it. And Joe Biden is sitting there saying, hey, this is a resource I can tap into, and it helps me short term. And I can say I'm doing something about oil and natural gas prices without actually doing anything that fundamentally fixes the problem, and while continuing policies that are designed to destroy America's energy industry. We talked a little bit about the budget yesterday, so I'm not going to go back into that. But trust me when I say they have no intention. The Biden administration has no intention of ever allowing any additional domestic oil and natural gas to be created, to be transported, to be shipped, and to be refined. That they view that as the thing they're trying to choke out. And so every effort they make in this area you have to realize they are choosing a pathway of dependency deliberately, because they're attempting to make America dependent upon the rest of the world under the guise of promoting so-called renewable energy. And the reason I harp on this is because this is everything. The energy is how we survive. You start having power outages and blackouts and inability to get gasoline for your cars, inability to get diesel for your trucks, and the entire system shuts down. And that's where they're going. And it doesn't break their heart when it happens. So as opposed to just quietly allowing Joe Biden to break everything, this is really an attempt to get people to be aware of what's going on. So you can talk to your members of Congress, talk to your elected officials, talk to anybody who might be in the media, and just explain to them what's actually going on and why it's dangerous. So with that, I'm going to read some stuff here. Let's see. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, this is Michael Brand. Our GOP senators need to do their job and vote no on radical. Yes, they do. And once again, go to getliberty.org, and we should have a take action there where you can send a note to your senators and your congressmen on this. Obviously, congressmen don't get to vote, but you'll hit your 2 senators with that message. Melissa Eberly, open up our pipelines. Yeah, Melissa, the challenge here, it's kind of weird, but our pipeline capacity was growing pretty rapidly during the Trump administration. That growth has diminished significantly during the first year of the Biden administration, because there's some projects they just couldn't stop. And so consequently that kept going. But the idea, they're trying to shut down various pipelines right now that have been safe and effective for 50 years. And they're trying to shut them down just because they can. That's the reality of what these guys are doing. And that's their reality. We need to expand our pipeline network. Think of our pipeline network like the interstate highway system. You need to have that pipeline network growing and extensive to handle the domestic production of oil and our intercontinental domestic production of oil. So we can create and natural gas for that matter. So we have the capacity to get the oil and natural gas from the field to the refiner and to your car or to your utility, public utility. So there you go. Let's see. They don't care. Potato Man is clueless but accountable. He was part of this when he did have a mind. Yeah, I don't know. I actually like people who grow potatoes, and I think the reference is kind of funny, but the truth is, one of the things we always try to do, and sometimes it's hard, but and I'm just gonna, and just in this kind of format, going back and forth, having fun, doing the Potato Man and stuff. But when we write here, we really try to we'll call Biden President Biden. And make certain that because he is president, like it or not, fair election or not, he's sitting in the Oval Office, and the office deserves that respect. Between us, we can talk about him in a more of a irreverential way, but we always try we try to treat people we don't agree with the same respect we would hope they would treat us with. And we know that that's not going to actually happen. We know that we can't expect them to have a Christian ethos. But you know what? Just because they're jerks doesn't mean we have to be. And like I say, I've used in private a lot of derogatory references to the president. And sometimes in public, when I'm on radio, it's just kind of gets out of me. But we really do try as an organization to show the respect for the office, even though the man himself really falls short of earning that respect himself. But we still have to recognize that being president of the United States is important and matters and deserves some degree of recognition and honor, even though we may not think the person who's in the position has neither earned nor deserves those honorifics. That's just kind of how we look at it. So let's see here. He's only doing it because midterms are coming up. They need the Democrats. 100%. Yeah, that's 100%. This is a political ploy. He wants to say he's doing something about high gas and oil prices, when the things that he could be doing that actually would make a difference are, he's ignoring, and in fact not ignoring. He is actively seeking to destroy, and it's pathetic. And I don't think the American public's fooled at all. He just wants to be able to say in the last year, and if this becomes true, he wants to be able to say he did something to staunch the increase, and then blame Putin for why the gas prices are so high. And it's while George W. Bush's friend Pooty does in fact bear some responsibility because of the attacks in Ukraine. These were problems that existed before. these were not, I use this, I say this a lot, and it is important. This is not a flaw in the Biden administration plan and the Biden administration's overall view of how the country should run. It's not a flaw. It's a feature. It is something they plan to have in it. It's, if you wanted to put down, features of buying a certain laptop, it gives you the camera, and it gives you the SD card, it gives you all this junk that's in there that some of us understand, and at least I don't. But if you were looking at that and you talked Biden's energy policy, a feature would be diminishing the importance of oil and natural gas and increasing the reliance on so-called renewable energy sources, even if, and an increase in exports of oil and natural gas to replace the domestic oil and natural gas that's being taken offline. That's their policy. So, let's not be surprised when prices are higher. People who voted for this guy, for this president, made a decision, and they don't realize the decision they made, but they made a decision. They wanted $4 a gallon gas. They made a decision that this was broken supply chains, and they made that decision. So I don't see a lot of them standing up and accepting the consequences of that, or saying, yeah, I made a bad decision. But the fact is, they did make that decision. Thank you for putting that in there. Let's see what we have. Yeah, DKR. This is a deliberate change for our entire system, not just for the elections. It's permanent. Yeah, in terms of the overall energy policy. Yeah, but here's, if Joe Biden were reelected, he no longer would have to pretend that he cared about higher oil. He would want even higher and higher gas and energy prices, because the objective of all of this is to make it so expensive energy sources become inexpensive by comparison to what were inexpensive energy sources that have artificially become very expensive. So that's what they're effectively doing. That's their plan. And during the Obama administration, they used this plan, and they discovered they had a problem with it, because when they drove gas prices really high, it became, and price of barrel of oil really high. A lot of these wildcatters who were punching holes and pulling up oil discovered, hey, we can afford to use hydraulic fracturing now, because we needed a break-even point of $80 a barrel. Oil's now $100 a barrel, so we can now go and do hydraulic fracturing and make it profitable. And so it actually allowed the hydraulic fracturing industry to start and become really prevalent. And the more they did it, the more efficient they got, and the more they were able to drive down the break-even point on it. And it got down, and I think with Continental Resources, it's about $35 a barrel now. And they do almost all hydraulic fracturing out of the Bakken oil fields, some in Oklahoma. And it's and so the best of the hydraulic fractures, now they have a break-even cost of $35 a barrel. And so what happens? So why aren't they now punching more holes? Well, here's where the Biden administration learned from what Obama did. They're putting every single new application on federal lands in particular. They're making those very, very, very difficult to get. They're taking applications that have been in place for a long time or at the end of the approval process, and they're saying, oh, we got to go back to square one to re-examine it all and make sure it was done right. And so they are deliberately undercutting the ability of these producers, these oil men, to be able to get new holes in the ground, new sources of oil coming up, and to fill the gap. Secondly, they have put such pressure on the banks through the ESG investing programs, ESG's environmental, social, and governance investing programs, that put an emphasis on green energy and directly attack investments in oil and natural gas. They put such a high premium in terms of that as an investment part of being part of an investment portfolio, that people who might want to punch those holes have a hard time getting the capital to do so. And so you make it regulatorily almost impossible, and then you deny capital for punching new holes. And so what you have is people who are pulling the oil out of the ground. They're making a lot of money doing that. And and at the end of the day, you're sitting there and we're paying higher prices for gas and for the refined product. And the Biden administration really doesn't care. They know this is what they want to have happen. And between now and Election Day in November, they want to limit the damage a little bit. And that's why they're tapping the Strategic Oil Reserve. Good comment, DKR. He needs to go out if White House impeaches. Sorry, but you know what? I have to agree with you. They won't get Democratic vote. Jacqueline, I think it's unlikely that we get the Democrat vote against KBJ. But you know what? I know we don't get it if we don't try. I know we don't get it if we don't take senators who represent red states, who represent conservative states, and we don't put pressure on them to vote against this nominee. And if we don't put pressure against them to vote against this nominee, then you know what doesn't work in the general election is complaining about the nominee. So the more information we're giving to people in those states that I named about this nominee, about the problems with this nominee, and more people we get upset about it, the more people we get to make this an issue that they're willing to contact Congress about, the more people are going to sit there and ask that senator when they're looking for their vote, well, what did you do on the Supreme Court nominee? And hold them accountable for that. So the pressure works both ways. The pressure, if they choose not to follow it, then there's people who are already worked up and want to vote them out because they didn't vote for KBJ. So it's a win-win from that perspective. And if we happen to get a Mark Kelly from Arizona or a John Tester from Montana, then you know what happens there? A really, really radical nominee doesn't end up on the court. So you fight this for a lot of reasons, and you fight it because she shouldn't be on the court. But you also fight it because it sets a political pretext for the battle and the Election Day battle. And it causes people to have another reason to come out to vote in and off your election to oppose a senator who is doing harm to the country. And folks, that's how you replace incumbent senators. So that's another point on this. Let's see here. We go green, we starve. Yep, that's correct. 100% correct. One of the things that we see happening around the world, let's just say here, because of ethanol, we have a tremendous amount of our corn fields, our agricultural fields being corn, and not human corn, but corn that's actually designed to be most efficient to make ethanol. And as a result, we're essentially growing, we're not growing food, we're growing energy under the guise of being green. And ethanol is a terrible product. It doesn't actually increase. It lowers your car's. It doesn't have the same ability to make your car run efficiently. So you can only use so much of it in a gallon of gas, about 10%. If you go to 15, it begins to rot your rubber tubes and stuff. So it doesn't burn as efficiently as a straight oil mix. And it's so you get less miles per gallon with it. And it costs a lot of energy points, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions to actually grow the darn stuff and to refine it. So ethanol is not really even a practical environmental solution. But what it is it's a lot of farmers grow corn in Iowa, and every presidential candidate has to go through Iowa. And so presidents get locked in on corn ethanol. And so it becomes a political staple rather than an actual energy staple. Let's see here. And wouldn't it be nice if we could have those, all that corn that's being grown to stick in fuel, be growing corn or other foodstuffs to lowering international food shortages, to be helping lower the cost of hogs and cattle, because we have the feed that we give them is less expensive because we have a lot of corn being devoted to that. So there's lots of stuff like that where you talk about go green, we start, where handicap is exactly right. Hey, good dudes, I use my own name here. You guys need to use your names. When I see handicap, I think of Andy Cap, the cartoon character. It's kind of so I think about a guy with a little kind of British hat on. We go broke, we go broke, we go woke, we go broke. Well, let's find out. Disney's given you I haven't talked about Disney, but Disney's given you the example. Disney in the last 20 years has never lost money. For all the crazy leftist stuff they've done, for all the Chinese pandering they've done, Disney itself hasn't lost money in the last 20 years. The only time Disney loses money is during recessions, deep recessions, because people don't use their theme parks and the like. But even during the 2019, 2020, they didn't lose money because they're so diversified with so many different divisions. But the fact is, Disney's shown us who they are. Disney's shown us who they are. So the question is to America, well, given that you know that, how important is your Tigger shirt? How important is buying a new Tigger shirt? How important is buying the latest Disney Plus? How important it is to go on a Disney cruise? How important it is to watch ESPN and give eyeballs to ESPN? How important is it to watch ABC, which Disney owns? How important is it to go and watch movies, Disney movies, the latest princess movie or whatever they're going to call them now, since they've got to have 50% alternative characters, according to the CEO or the president of the company. But ultimately, you're the ones who make Disney have a profit. I'm the one who makes Disney have a profit. And are we going to be willing to say, Disney, you went woke, so you're going broke? If you're taking your kids to Florida or to California, are you going to go to Universal Studios? Or are you going to go to Epcot Center? Are you going to go to Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain? Or are you going to go to Disneyland or California Adventure? Those are choices. And we have to make those choices. And by the way, you save money when you go to the alternative locations. So those are choices, and we have to make those choices. And if America keeps on putting our dollars into Disney bucks, guess what? They will go woke and they won't go broke. So let's make that statement's been pretty accurate over time. Well, let's try to make that statement accurate when it comes to Disney. We must stand together and help each other. 100%. That's one of the credos that we have at Americans for Limited Government is we don't just want to inform, we want to engage. That's why I spend so much time talking about different take action things we have, because I'd be doing half a job if I was just telling you what was going on without giving you something to do about it. And so we spend a lot of our resources on providing you stuff to actually do something about it, because these are systems we have to rent. We lease them essentially on a month basis. But we lease them with an idea that you will be able to use those systems to affect change. And so that's why we do it. And hopefully we hope you guys will share them and we maximize value of those systems. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know where this came in, and that's exactly why we keep losing. But I'm going to agree with you because I don't know which point you were talking about. We were energy dependent before Biden. We can do it again. Biden is not my president. Jacqueline, I understand. The hardest words I have to say every day is President Biden. Those two words don't seem like they should go together. But nothing pissed me off more than when I hear these foofs say, Donald Trump is not my president. And the people who were lying to obstruct his presidency, people who were sitting there legitimizing, undercutting his presidency by engaging in active rebellion as civil servants, people who were sitting there saying, he's not my president, so it's okay to go and have John Kerry run around trying to make alternative deals around Europe. that undercut the U.S. position with our foreign allies. You know, John Kerry actually violated the Logan Act, unlike Mike Flynn or Donald Trump during the transition. John Kerry actually did violate the Logan Act, should have been prosecuted, and never was. And that's the reality. And that's the outshow. That's what happens when your political elites say, "Not my president." And so I try not to say that, but I certainly understand it. And quite honestly, it's hard not to agree with it. Let's see here. Boop. Cabbage. Okay. Sorry. Valet bone rules. Open borders is aiding and abetting cartels. Child trafficking is actually happening. Our borders, along our borders, we have to get this fraudulent administration out before we have no control. We did a piece that published today. If you haven't seen it, you should go. Robert Romano wrote, did a good job. We had over 1 million interventions, actual contacts with our border patrol, with illegal aliens in the first 6 months of this fiscal year, which ends today. That's 1 million. That's like more than we normally get in a year, and we've got it in a half year. The fact is, this administration has put out a welcome mat, and they're taking other actions right now to take away some of the protections that were put in place to stop people from coming. And the predictions are that the flow of illegal aliens into our country will treble based upon some of the changes that the Biden administration is trying to implement. And you know what, folks? This is a simple situation. If the Republicans need to start getting some guts and fighting on some things, if they're not willing to fight for our borders, don't tell me that we have to go fight for the Ukrainian borders. Let's see here. Dominion and mail-in. I think getting election security is really important. It's amazing to me that in states that are controlled by Republican legislatures and Republican governors, that they haven't done a wholesale examination of their voting systems and voted the money to replace those systems if they find them wanting. That hasn't happened in most places, and I think it's damning of those Republicans for not doing that. Marxist regime of today is the flaw. Have a way to fix it, but remain spineless as a group. Yeah, it's a flaw, and he stole the election. He didn't win it. Jacqueline, I'm not disagreeing with you. We pushed really hard on auditing the vote. We pushed really hard on all of that. We've pushed really hard to try to make certain the civil rights of the J6 protesters are being upheld. I know that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be having another trip over to the DC jail, along with members of Congress, to try to help those people who are housed there and so many in solitary confinement for doing nothing other than taking a selfie in the middle of the Capitol. It's one of the most heartrending things I've ever experienced in this country, because it's everything we say we aren't, and it drives me just through the roof to think about it. And it's not a really easy position in Washington, D.C. to stand up for the J6 protesters. It puts you in a place where a lot of the people who are normally your allies get a little oogie. But you know what? If they don't have civil rights, then none of us do. And I'm really kind of sick of this idea that civil rights for me, but not for thee. I was not, when that happened, I put stuff out saying, you guys have just screwed up. You shouldn't have done that. I decried it. On January 6th, about an hour and a half after it happened, or while it's still happening, actually. And you can go back in time and read that. So, but the fact of the matter is, walking into the Capitol and taking a selfie in the rotunda should not ruin your life. It's a misdemeanor at best, and it certainly shouldn't land you in jail for a year. And it makes me sick that our Department of Justice is doing this and is attacking and spending massive resources to try to attack people who didn't do anything wrong in order to, or they did, in many cases, they were let into the Capitol by Capitol police officers, and they were wandering around. They didn't do it. There was no vandalism. They didn't do any of that stuff. They couldn't be, and so they get convicted of things like parading, which is merely just being in the wrong place. So it's heartrending. It pisses me off. It makes me want to actually, it's one of those things that actually makes me want to cry, because it's how they're being treated is so antithetical to what this country is supposed to be about. Veronica, I agree with you. There's proof, more proof coming out every day. We know what happened in Wisconsin. We know that there were that the mail-in ballots had like 4.5 million of them were compromised in some way around the country. We know that in virtually every state that was a contested state, there were let's say anomalies, but we also know that they flood. That there was a flood of absentee ballots, mail-in ballots that came into these jurisdictions, and once they got opened, there was absolutely no way to deal with them because they just were put into the system. And so you sat there and you said, okay, well, we know this was an invalid absentee ballot, but we don't know which one of the 15 million ballots in the system it is. And since we don't know who that person voted for, you can't disqualify it. It becomes, and our courts failed us on this. Our courts should have intervened. They were, I'll just say, they're chicken. They were cowards in not intervening. They didn't do their job, and they did. And as a result of not doing their job, we have the mess we have right now. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm in the trucking industry. I'm paying $5.50 a gallon diesel. It's crippling the U.S. truckers. He is deliberately destroying us. First of all, do me a favor and send me an email, rmanning@getliberty.org. I do a lot of stuff on supply chain, and I work with some of the people in the trucking industry on it. But I really would like to get some really on the road perspective of what's going on and choices that are being made. I've heard from farmers about concern about not being able to run their tractors at the high cost of diesel, and choosing not to plant fields that are least productive because it doesn't make sense to run the tractor to plant and run the tractor to harvest. So there's choices being made in the farm area. There's also concern that with short run trucking, that there won't be enough trucks to take the harvest to market, to the processors. And as a result, it becomes, shall we say, because those runs, the cost of diesel for those runs is so high that cost, that they won't be able to make a profit in selling their potatoes or whatever. So I really want to hear what your experiences are. So rmanning@getliberty.org. We've been on now for, a long time. I'm going to cut it off right now. I know there's a lot of other good comments on here. But I just appreciate everybody staying on, everybody paying attention. This is important. Our country is worth fighting for. And I truly do appreciate this time I get to spend with you. Thank you very much. And just keep fighting. I went to the University of Southern California, and our motto is fight on. And fight on is not something you say when things are easy. Fight on something you say when they're hard. And so with that, I say fight on.